I don't know if you guys have noticed, but people are kind of worked up about this Azeez Al-Shaair hit on Trevor Lawrence. That's just something I noticed. Maybe not everybody's as astute a media observer as myself, but it's been a long week. It's been a long week of litigating, vociferously defending or attacking Azeez Al-Shaair or Trevor Lawrence. And I do think at one point, hopefully sometime soon, we can move beyond it. But I think a couple of the kind of more far-reaching effects of this are two things. One, there's going to start being a discussion about exactly what we should do with the QB slide and the rules. So no matter how you feel about whether Azeez Al-Shaair could or could not have laid off that hit or should have known that Trevor Lawrence was definitely sliding or not, people's opinions are pretty cemented on that. They're set in stone, and the other side's an idiot, and that I get it. And it's going to be heavily influenced by how you feel about the game of football, whether you're from Houston or Jacksonville. That part I get. The other part of it, so that's kind of a league implication. I think there's going to be discussion about tweaking the rules about faking a QB slide or just punishments levied or whatnot. The other part of it is how does it affect the Texans moving forward? And I think there's a couple interesting parts of that have come to light as we've discussed this over the week. So first and foremost, I just want to play a couple clips from Tom Brady, a couple clips from Stephen A. Smith. Obviously, both great football players and both great commentators. I do think Tom Brady's growing on me as a color commentator. But Tom Brady with a take that surprised some people on Colin Cowherd this week, talking about the responsibilities that quarterbacks have when they do pull down the ball and become runners.
And you put yourself in a lot of danger. And when you do that, I don't think the onus of protecting an offensive quarterback who's running should be on a defensive player. I don't think that's really fair to the defense. So if you slide and it's, everyone can argue, was it black and white or was it just a gray area? Do you slide late or is it unnecessary roughness or is it a late hit? To me, a late hit is very late. There's quarterbacks that I see running and tiptoe on the sideline and they're not even out of bounds and they get hit as they're starting to step out of bounds and there's a penalty flag thrown.
So we've talked about that. Pat Mahomes will fake a slide. Caleb Williams kind of tiptoed and maybe thought that somebody would lay off because he was a quarterback earlier this season. Azeez Al-Shaair made a clean and legal hit on Caleb Williams. And Caleb Williams in a way kind of took the brunt of it that time, where a lot of other times quarterbacks are getting away scot-free at faking a slide and then motoring on. We've seen Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, various other people do that. So can defenders be expected to just lay off anytime a quarterback expects to slide? So leaving Azeez Al-Shaair completely out of it, I, like Tom Brady, I don't think that that's fair to the defense, and I don't think it's fair to the quarterbacks that you're trying to protect. In history, football has a long history of trying to implement safety measures that end up actually working against player safety. And in some ways, you could say the hard plastic helmet and the really thick metal face mask that followed after that kind of maybe created more issues. They got the leather helmet was really bad at protecting you from skull fractures. The plastic helmet is awesome at protecting you from skull fractures, but it does tend to create a lot more concussions, most likely, for both the offense and the defense. So the things always have far-reaching implications. The QB slide and the way that quarterbacks are basically exploiting it to fake it, that's an issue. And I think, like they've done in college already, ban faking the QB slide. It's got to be a hefty fine if you're a quarterback who fakes a slide, because it's a hefty amount of money that it takes to hurt a quarterback. But a 15-yard penalty too, if you can, that hurts a quarterback more than $100,000. The way quarterbacks are wired, they would much rather get that first down than they would pay $100,000 for a first down at times in games. I think that's a simple enough fix, and that gets rid of a lot of the gray area that we have here. But it's a gray area, and gray areas create the most furious debate. That's why, at the root of it all, I don't want to get into this. Okay, I will. The Second Amendment. Part of the problem with discussion, even legally, like amongst lawyers who have no skin in the game but are just arguing legally, it's kind of it's a poorly punctuated sentence that leads to a lot of ambiguity. So both sides of people on either side of the Second Amendment argument can point to like the little weirdnesses in the Second Amendment in the way James Madison wrote it. Madison kind of wrote it almost like an afterthought, and it leads to a lot of hot debate because you're in danger of losing that debate because of the hazy parameters. That's where we are right now with defenders trying to tackle a quarterback who may or may not be sliding. Simplify it, make it simpler. Quarterbacks, yes, take the onus on themselves to protect themselves, but also just do away with that part that makes it really complicated, which is the fake QB slide. Simple enough. NFL fixed. You're welcome. We won't have to listen to this forever. Here's Brady with another dynamic in it, and Sean Bajani this morning brought this up and in his own way, but it speaks to the same thing. Part of the difference in the NFL right now is, and it would follow suit that they would institute a ban of the fake slide a few years behind college football, because it's relatively new that all of a sudden just about every quarterback in the game is pretty athletic. Even like CJ Stroud's athleticism by 1990s standards, he's a pretty athletic quarterback. Now it's kind of like, I guess, he can run, right? Like he can do it when he needs to. So they're just running a lot more. Here's Tom Brady.
Designed runs for quarterbacks ever now than in the history of the NFL. So are we really trying to protect quarterbacks? Because if you are trying to do it through the rules, then why are the offensive coordinators not protecting their quarterbacks by keeping them in the pocket and not designing as many quarterback runs?
Yeah, and this kind of goes into, and I know with Brady, people will always say like, hey, wait a second, didn't they change the rule book to protect quarterbacks specifically because of your ACL injury? Yes, 100%. I don't think, I think Brady understands that, but he's trying to speak objectively as possible. Just like when a quarterback throws a wide receiver into danger, he can throw himself into danger by trying to push the envelope a little too much. And it would be really interesting to see a study of like how many times does a quarterback get hit while sliding when it's close to a first down marker, because that's the other part of the way the rule is called. They call the quarterback down where the first body part hits, where theoretically it's supposed to be where he initiates the slide, which to me would be when he initially drops his pad level to slide. And the distances close quickly. Trevor Lawrence started to drop into the slide maybe 4 or 5 yards before the line to gain, and his shin ends up hitting 1 yard before the line to gain. And I'm honestly, I'm not even blaming Trevor Lawrence or acting like he's the actual villain in this at all. It's just that he's incentivized because of the way the rule is enforced to do that. So get rid of that incentive too, as well as get rid of the ability to fake a QB slide. And I think it becomes a cleaner game and it becomes a cleaner issue. Trevor Lawrence, if he knew he had to slide, but knew that he wasn't anywhere close to the first down marker, if he initiated his slide where he did, then he might have slid that much sooner. Just slide when there's nobody else in the area to be even in danger. So that's that part of it. I'm okay. I'm not happy with the severity of the punishment. We'll get into that. As far as moving beyond this specific incident, I think there's going to be a discussion about it in the offseason. And I don't want to try to turn Azeez Al-Shaair into a martyr or anything, but I think that from a defensive player's perspective, it's a lot harder than people think it is to make that decision in the blink of an eye, like immediately in the blink of the eye. I saw one person ask about explain leading with the forearm. Okay, this is what I'd say. Once Azeez Al-Shaair committed to making a tackle, whether you agree that he should have or shouldn't have or whatever, let's call that the original sin. So once he makes that decision that I'm not sure he's going to slide, I'm going to go for it. Okay, cool. The damage is done at that point. People are acting like him leading with the forearm was the worst thing that ever happened. What happens if he doesn't lead with the forearm? What happens? He's leading with his head. And that's why it's so frustrating that people have tried to paint him out to be like some Vontaze Burfict type of character. Vontaze Burfict was a headhunter. He was hitting dudes in the head. Lots of other notorious enforcers or dirty players or what have you have been headhunters. And I don't think Azeez Al-Shaair, I think he's been a hard hitter. But he hasn't been a headhunter. He hasn't been specifically targeting the head. So in hitting him on the shoulder, the other thing too is, okay, if he removes the forearm from it, now he's leading with the head. Anatomically, that's the way it works. Then he also has more of a chance of not only leading with the head, but just like we've seen in countless other instances, when defenders try to go over the top of a sliding player, half the time they end up hitting the player in the head. So if let's say you don't think he should have tried to make the tackle, fine. The original sin was committing to make the tackle. But after that, if he had wanted to hit Trevor Lawrence in the head, he very much could have hit him in the head. And he didn't. He hit him in that left shoulder area. Was he going after the injured left shoulder? I don't care. I would do it. Many other defenders would do it. If it's not the head and you got an injured body part, yeah, hell yeah, I'm going to target that. I'm going to go after whatever hurts the most on the guy. That's football. Doug Peterson shouldn't have put him out there. So on ESPN, whatever they call their show in the morning now, Stephen A. Smith and Jeff Saturday were on there discussing this. And this was after Caserio had made his comments on Tuesday. I didn't get around to watching this until early this morning, but they were responding to this segment of Nick Caserio's press conference.
The league to make some of the commentary that Dean made about lack of sportsmanship, lack of coachability, lack of paying attention to the rules. Quite frankly, it's embarrassing. So I think the big thing from our, and I talk about a player who's never been suspended, never been ejected. So now we're saying that he's going to be suspended for 3 games. So, look, it is what it is. I think the big thing from our standpoint, and all teams want this, is just some level of consistency. And we've talked to the league, quite frankly. We don't have a good explanation. D'Amico talked to them yesterday. So, I mean, it is what it is. I'm sure Azeez will go through whatever process he's going to go through, and then we'll deal with it accordingly. But I think what we take umbrage is just the picture that's been painted about Azeez, his intentions, who he is as a person. I mean, quite frankly, it's bull.
Oh, thank you, First Take. It's First Take for bleeping that out for me. I don't want to get flagged myself. So the key thing that people keep getting wrong, and I'm amazed that they're getting this wrong, is they keep saying that Caserio thought that Azeez Al-Shaair shouldn't get suspended at all, which he never once says or even comes close to saying. I thought it was pretty clear in that press conference in his multiple statements and answers to questions was that it was the severity of the punishment. It was the unprecedented nature of a 3-game suspension for a guy who had never been suspended before. Denzel Perryman, and we'll get to that, was suspended for 3 games last year. It was reduced down to 2 after never having been suspended before, unless I didn't catch something. So for his asking for consistency was not claiming that there was no justification for Azeez getting suspended. It was the fact that it was a 3-game suspension, and that he and, I know Texans officials in general haven't been happy with just silence that they've met with and some questions for clarification from the league. So knowing that, the Caserio never once said that Al-Shaair shouldn't be suspended at all. This was Stephen A. Smith's response to it.
You're going to go in front of the reporters knowing your player was warned 7 times? So you're asking for consistency. So how about the word appreciation? The fact that they didn't suspend him before. Are you saying they should have suspended him earlier?
Right.
Because basically what you're doing is maligning and excoriating the league for finally doing what it should have done earlier.
Right.
Now, if the man didn't do anything, he didn't commit any violations prior to that, that was different.
Okay, then Saturday nodding his little head and saying, "You go, Stephen A." You go, Stephen A. Oh, Stephen A. speaks the truth. Colts. Saturday's a swell fella. So, again, I already stated it beforehand. No, Stephen A. Smith, he wasn't saying that he shouldn't be fined or suspended. He never even came close to saying that he shouldn't have been suspended. The thing is that he was suspended for 3 games. You could talk about the melee and how that contributed to it. The problem is that melee, I mean, for one, the melee really started when Evan Ingram hit Al-Shaair from behind. Which, look, I'll be honest, if I were on that team, if I were in that same situation as Evan Ingram, I might have done the same thing. If it was a teammate of mine that did it, or if I was the coach of that player, I would get it and be like, all right, Evan Ingram's got his guys back. You would much rather, we've seen this before, right? Like, we don't like it when CJ gets hit and no offensive linemen do anything about it. So I get that part of it. But the league, the governing body that's supposed to be making the game safer, has been mute about that when part of their player safety initiative is that like frontier justice, retribution, guys entering a scrum, all of that is supposed to be a no-go. You're not supposed to do that. But so Evan Ingram does something that, even if it's justified, is very, very, very illegal. And then all of the Jaguars players surround Azeez Al-Shaair, and then all the other stuff ensues. But then the other part of it, which the league seems content to blame Azeez Al-Shaair completely for, is that they cite when he re-engaged with Jaguars players in the end zone. This is the problem with that. That play happened at the 45-yard line. I don't know why there would be any reason for a Jaguars player to be anywhere near the end zone at that point, if not to antagonize Azeez Al-Shaair. So in excusing the Jaguars completely and wholly so far, maybe there will be fines levied on Saturday from that action and from Evan Ingram's action, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. So that part of it, I've got issues with. And then this last thing, this is almost unrelated, but when we come to the perception of the Texans, and both from the public and then from the league itself, this is what I'm concerned about moving forward, is how Stephen A. chose to preface all of this in addressing Nick Caserio.
He mentioned the word embarrassment. The first thing I thought about when the name came to Nick Caserio was how embarrassing his tenure was before he lucked up and got D'Amico Ryans and drafted C.J. Stroud. Because prior to that, one would argue that his tenure there was embarrassing and disgraceful with the coaches he kept pushing in and out the door and all of this other stuff. You know, I got on national television, just so y'all know, fellas, and was like, I'm talking about, you're a black man looking to be a head coaching job. Don't talk to that man. All right, I was nervous for D'Amico Ryans. I said, he's just using you for a year and they're going to kick you out the door.
All right, so Stephen A. chose to prime the pump for Texans hatred by bringing up something that he was 100% wrong about. Oh, okay, you're just going to throw race out there for no good reason whatsoever. Yeah, Nick Caserio, that guy that made a bad hire in David Culley, and then tried to fix it with who I think David Culley, realistically, you could have hoped would be like a 2-year bridge coach. Hired Lovie Smith, and then ultimately hired D'Amico Ryans. So all of the accusations that you wanted to make about the Texans and how racist they were kind of fall on deaf ears if what your evidence was, hey, they keep firing black head coaches, which, yeah, by the way, it's because they keep hiring black head coaches. The Texans have had either a black GM or a black head coach for almost every year since 2006. The two most important positions other than owner in a football team, either the GM or the head coach, their track record is pretty good on that. D'Amico Ryans is in no danger of getting fired, I would say, anytime in the next 3 years. I'd be really, really surprised if there were serious discussions about it, no matter how things go. So that bothers me, but it speaks to, okay, the public perception of the Texans. And if the Texans want to embrace this villain's role, which it feels like they might kind of want to be doing, should they be careful about that because of this part of it? So the precedent for guys getting fined or getting suspended for 3 games for an illegal hit, they're few and far between, and the only ones that have been cited really are Denzel Perryman and Azeez Al-Shaair, both Houston Texans. Kareem got a 3-game suspension last year when he was with the Broncos, but he had been, correct me if I'm wrong, previously suspended once before that. But I think it's notable when you wonder about how does the league perceive the Houston Texans. D'Amico signed Kareem coming off of his suspension last year. Denzel Perryman was on the Texans when he was suspended 3 games, reduced to 2 for the illegal hit. His replacement, Azeez Al-Shaair, gets suspended 3 games. And I wonder if in the league office and the safety mavens and all those people are kind of got a button that they're pressing, or they get a buzzer goes off anytime a Houston Texans player gets in trouble because they don't like the way the Texans play aggressive physical defense. So is there going to be extra scrutiny on the Texans? And especially because of the response of Nick Caserio and D'Amico Ryans. A couple of our listeners brought this up, and I think I agree with them. You know, and that's where the other reason that this topic gets so much attention is because you might think you agree with somebody, you know, on the major issues surrounding any of this, but then you get into it and you're like, hey, wait a second, yeah, but I don't agree about that. Well, no, actually, quarterbacks shouldn't be held responsible. So there's a million different things to argue about. But the timing of the response by D'Amico, the timing of the response by Caserio, I fully 100% endorse those guys' passion. If you could go back in time and do it again, could it have helped in the immediate future if both D'Amico and Caserio had waited to criticize the league? Wait until after the appeal. I don't know. I don't know exactly how much influence and pressure the league might put on Ramon Foster, any of the NFL attorneys present in that regard. I don't think it probably helped, but that's where if you're splitting hairs and trying to figure out all the little things that could have been done differently, yeah, maybe they could have timed it until after the appeal. Wait and see if it gets reduced to 2 games and then do it. If their strategy was to somehow like bully the league into getting it reduced, maybe it had an effect, maybe it didn't. The sum total of it is Azeez Al-Shaair's suspension not reduced. So I don't know if when I tweeted out yesterday that the Texans could embrace the villain role and kind of be like the Raiders, but with a better credit rating, which I meant mostly as a joke about how poorly the Raiders' finances are managed. But also, a lot of people after that pointed out, like, hey, Seth, you know, the Raiders, they were a really, really good football team back in the heyday of when they were villains. The Astros, it's a lot easier and more fun to be the villain when you're also winning championships. We've seen that. We've experienced that. It does make the social media experience a little annoying because you just constantly have, it's hard to have an opinion about the Astros without some jamoke from Nebraska coming in and going after you. The balance that I hoped they would find, and this came to me during the show this morning, was what it was like with the Nebraska Cornhuskers in the 1990s under the stately, gentlemanly, grandfather-like Tom Osborne. Those guys were psycho, because I played with guys who played on those Nebraska teams, both on offense and defense. My God, they, like stuff, it was like the movie, The Program. Those guys were out of control. And the Nebraska local cops would kind of turn a blind eye to stuff. They'd have parties that were kind of crazy. On the field, they were just psychotically aggressive. In practice, the way they hazed players, it was nuts. And yet, Tom Osborne had a little bit of like a D'Amico Ryans type vibe to him, just a gentle warrior. And yet, it helped, I think, him maybe get away with some stuff in the way that his players conducted themselves that maybe other coaches couldn't have gotten away with. I don't know. So whether they're villains or not, I think that D'Amico, for the most part, has this defense playing in his image. He's got them playing ferociously. He's got them making incredibly hard hits. I was on record before any of this happened as saying that, look, Al-Shaair's got to dial it back just a tick. Like, I'm more upset about the late hit versus the Titans than I am, because I'm not concerned about his hit on Trevor Lawrence. I think he was thinking that Trevor Lawrence might be faking and he better not mess it up. So the late hit out of bounds against the Titans, that was egregious. And it didn't end up with anybody being injured or anything, but it was really late and it could have been avoided. That's the kind of stuff that I think he's got to learn to just dial it back a little bit. When you go out, I think like almost every time I've hit a guy out of bounds, there's almost like, it happened a lot when I was in high school. So there's a moment where you realize like, oh, this is going to be way out of bounds, but the deal is done. You know, at least for me, that's how it always was. As like, and then sometimes maybe there's a moment where you're like, well, I'm going to get flagged anyway. Just really uncoil those hips. It's just, it happens. It's tough. All right, let's see. Don't do slow like that. CJ looked awesome. Oh, you're talking to Brohawk? Okay. So, I went way longer than I meant to. Oh, it's only been at 24 minutes. And I'm going to set up the boosted comments there so we can all donate to charity together, so I don't have to try to scroll through comments and everything. Funny how the QBs are more supportive of Al-Shaair than the normal people. Yeah, and I don't, it's interesting. I'd like to see a poll of the average NFL fan and whether or not they feel like all of this has been blown up too much or not. There's people on both sides. Obviously, it's going to be more in support of Al-Shaair in Houston than it is in Jacksonville. That's very, very clear. But I haven't gotten a real gauge for whether, there's going to be one group of people that feel like football is being turned into flag football. There's other people that think it was an egregiously bad hit, and never the twain shall meet. Please like, subscribe, get lost, jamokes, if that's the case. And everybody take it easy. Have a good weekend. And let's see. Oh, Meltzer. I've got Meltzer Tuesday. Mike Meltzer's going to be on the stream on Tuesday. We'll figure out a time that works for us both. I'm going to start trying to have Mike Meltzer on pretty regularly. Maybe a little bit of a recreation of what did we call our show? Mad Radio. Which wasn't because we were mad, even though I used to be a lot more angry back in the day. It was because the original show was Meltzer and Davies. Brad Davies was his co-host. When Brad Davies left to go be a real estate magnate, I stepped in and they were like, well, it's just basically our boss who hired me resigned 2 weeks later, and I don't think he felt like coming up with a new name. So Mad Radio Redux coming up sometime next Tuesday. Everybody have a good one.